Hello, everybody. I'm Connie Joe with Soul Navigation. And today we're going to look at markers in the chart that might mean you are faithful, that there is total fidelity in your relationship. And yes, there's markers in the chart that actually show that. So just because you have a few markers, or if you even have all of the markers, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be faithful, but it does mean there's a good chance that you will be. So you have to look at the entire chart to get the big picture. And if you would like for me to look at your chart with you, I would love to do that. You can book a reading in the notes below. But let's get out our natal charts and definitely get out the chart for your partner. And let's look at markers in the chart that might make you more faithful. And I want to invite you to leave comments, whether you agree or disagree. I want to know about your experience with fidelity in the natal chart. Let me know. Leave some comments. The first marker in the natal chart that might indicate that you're faithful or have fidelity is a fixed sign on the descendant. Look for your rising sign over here, your ascendant, and the sign opposite that is your descendant. And that is your seventh house cusp. It starts the seventh house. The seventh house is our house of committed relationships. So we're going to look a lot at the seventh house today to find those fidelity markers. So if you have a fixed sign on the descendant, let me tell you what they are. So they are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And each of them kind of act in a different way. But the fixed signs are exactly what they say they are. They are fixed. It's hard to move from that fixed energy. So once you're in a relationship, when you have a fixed sign on that house of committed relationships, you're not likely to move. It's almost a stubborn energy where you refuse to let go, where you are determined to make it work. And each of these signs have a ton of determination, but in different ways. So let's break it down just a bit. So if you are a Scorpio rising, meaning you have Taurus on your seventh house cusp or your descendant, Taurus' main goal in life, basically, is to have security. They want to be secure. So security is their main goal. This is a fixed earth sign. They're very down to earth. They're very set in reality. This is probably the most grounded sign in the entire zodiac, this fixed earth Taurus. Once you're committed to someone, you want to keep that security. And there is a stubbornness about it with Taurus. They're ruled by the bull. That is their symbol. So they can be quite stubborn about making this relationship work. So security, the main thing. So if you have Taurus on the descendant, you are not likely to cheat and you probably are going to be faithful forever. All right, so let's go to the next one. Let's look at Leo. So if you're an Aquarius rising, meaning you have Leo on that seventh house cusp or the descendant, Leo is all about loyalty. If you have Leo here, you're probably very affectionate. You're very loyal, very steadfast. There's a lot of pride with this placement, meaning that for pride alone, this person might stay in a relationship. But a lot of it is just loyalty. Leo energy is very loyal. So if you have Leo on your descendant, you are likely to be very faithful. All right, if you have if you have Taurus rising, meaning you have Scorpio on the descendant, it's a little bit of a different energy. Scorpio energy can be very possessive. Now, Taurus can too, but in a different way. Scorpio wants to get to the depths of your soul. So with Taurus, it's I own you. And with Scorpio, it's I own your soul. So when you get someone that's a Taurus rising, Scorpio descendant, to settle down, to commit in a relationship, you are likely to keep them for life. Despite the fact that Scorpio energy can get a bad reputation because they rule the sexual part of our chart, it doesn't mean they're players. It just means that they want something deeper. And when you have Scorpio on the descendant, you are probably likely to stay with that person forever. Can the energy get a little jealous sometimes or possessive? Maybe, but it's also very faithful. So Aquarius is the most interesting sign on the descendant of the fixed signs. So if you're a Leo rising, it might be a little bit hard to commit. Aquarius energy is not big on commitment. They really like their freedom, that Uranian energy that they have. They like their freedom. They like things to be a little bit different, unique. So they might be a partner that likes to shake things up a little bit, but they are steadfast. They are a fixed air. Once they make up their mind about a relationship, they are not likely to budge. As a matter of fact, I would say of all of the fixed signs, it's harder to get an Aquarius to budge than any of them. As much as stubborn as Taurus can be, as possessive as Scorpio can be, and as loyal as Leo can be, it's Aquarius that might stay the longest of them all. So once you get an Aquarius descendant, meaning Leo rising, to commit, usually it's for a lifetime. And that is why having a fixed sign on the seventh house cusp is a sign of fidelity in the natal chart. Okay, let's move on to number 2. So if you have Saturn in the seventh house, this could be a sign of fidelity for you. Somewhat, some degree, having Capricorn on the descendant is the same premise. So Saturn in the seventh house, it brings this responsibility. It brings fairness to the commitment. It just brings commitment because Saturn is father time. Saturn is the planet of longevity. And when you have Saturn in that seventh house of committed relationships, usually you're in it to win it. You're there for a lifetime. Now, sometimes it may take someone with Saturn in the seventh house a little bit longer to commit because they know that once they make that commitment, they're not budging, that they're going to stay there. They're going to make it work. They're going to take responsibility to make that relationship work. Sometimes Saturn in the seventh house means that you may prefer someone that's older than you. That's the case sometimes. Also with Capricorn on the descendant. But Saturn in the seventh is very loyal. Even if it takes them a little bit longer to make a commitment, they're in it to stay. It's that responsibility factor. And also, Saturn energy actually cares about their reputation. They care what other people think. Yeah, they do. If you have Saturn in the seventh house, for reputation alone, you may remain faithful and committed. Do you have Saturn in the seventh house? Please leave me a comment below and let me know how this has acted in your romantic relationships, in your commitments. I'd really like to know. But before we leave Saturn in the seventh house, I just want to move Saturn up a notch to the eighth house. Now, this isn't my third marker for fidelity, but I did want to mention this. If you have Saturn in the eighth house, you may find it difficult to be intimate. It may be really hard for you to identify with someone enough to become deeply intimate with them. And the eighth house is our house of deep intimacy. If you have Saturn there and you already find it hard to make that intimate commitment with someone, you're going to be really picky about that. You're not going to just let anybody in there. And when you do, when you're in that committed relationship and you do have the intimacy, you're not likely to leave that. You're likely to stay with that person. Okay, let's move on to marker number 3. All right, everybody, this next aspect may surprise some of you just a bit, but it's Pluto in the seventh house, which is a little bit like having Scorpio on the descendant or seventh house cusp. And I think you'd be surprised because People are scared of Pluto transits sometimes. And it's understandable because Pluto is that dark planet that will go to the darkest places to transform our lives. So it can be a bit scary. But what happens with Pluto in the seventh is that it transforms us through committed relationships, through other people. The change, the transformation, the new start actually comes through Pluto in that seventh house. I think some people would argue with me about that. It's okay. I don't argue, but I would like to see your comments. Another thing, it brings a depth and an intimacy. If you have Pluto in the seventh house, you may wait until there's someone in your life that you can be intimate and that deep with, that you can go to that deeper level. Pluto doesn't like surface level stuff. It just doesn't. It's not like fun loving Sagittarius or Gemini energy. It wants to get serious. It wants to go down as far as it can go. It wants to know all of your secrets. And if you're in a committed relationship with someone that has Pluto in the seventh house, they'll probably know all of your secrets and you may know theirs too. But there's this depth that comes with that. And if you're open to transformation through a relationship, if you're open to this, then it can be life changing. This could be the relationship that changes your life. And it absolutely makes you faithful because you don't want to step away from that intimacy, from that depth that Pluto in the seventh house can give you. And this is why Pluto in the seventh house is my third, I believe we're on number 3, marker in the chart for fidelity. So number 4 may not surprise you at all. This is Venus in a harmonious aspect to Saturn. Now, I know that all of you Soul Navigation subscribers already know your aspects. I feel like you guys are some of the smartest astrological people I've ever met. But if you're new to the channel, welcome. And a harmonious aspect is when it's the trine or the sextile, and most of the time the conjunction where the planets are right there together and the energies meld together, but it brings harmony. The trine means it's continuous. The energy doesn't stop. There's no blockages. And the sextile, which is one sign away, means you have to work a little bit harder at it, but there's still harmony. You can still work with that aspect. Okay, so when we have Venus and Saturn together, this brings responsibility and seriousness and love all together in one. It's like you already have that beautiful father time longevity that Saturn gives along with Venus. It tends to make people really faithful when they have this aspect. For one, it may take them longer to get in a relationship. And number 2, when they're in it, they take responsibility for themselves. They take responsibility for the relationship, for what they bring to the table. And most of the time, Venus in harmonious aspect to Saturn, there's a bit of self-esteem involved. They have a decent value system where they value relationships, where they value love. Now, this doesn't mean you don't value love if Saturn is making a square or an opposition to your Venus, but it can mean there can be blockages involved because the energy of a square is a block. When the energy is flowing like the trine or the sextile or the conjunction, it's like you have this nice flow of responsibility, of father time stepping in, with being in love with this person. It's when you make the commitment, you are truly committed for life. It's a very faithful aspect. Now, I do want to say that sometimes, because it's Saturn, it can be harder to express your affection, maybe harder to express your love. But there is such a loyalty when it comes to Saturn and Venus together that even if it may take you a little bit longer to be affectionate, Saturn cares. Saturn wants things to work out. And Venus loves to be in a relationship that there's commitment and there's value. That I think that's the word I'm looking for, where there's actually value in the relationship. And this really doesn't even have to be a relationship, although we are talking about fidelity. But when someone with Saturn Venus just meets a friend, usually they're very loyal to that friend. All right, let's move on to marker number 5. I do want to go back to Saturn for just 1 minute. If you have your moon in a harmonious aspect to Saturn, the results can somewhat be the same. As the moon is our visceral instincts, it's our emotions, it's our very soul. So when you put your soul together in harmonious aspect with Saturn, the likelihood that you're going to stay committed or stay in that relationship is so much higher. All right, now we're going on to number 5. This next marker of fidelity in the natal chart really might surprise you, but it's Mercury in a harmonious aspect to Jupiter. So this can mean the conjunction, the trine, or the sextile. And there's a lot of reasons why this works. One thing, these people can be very talkative. Really, they want to know everything about everything. Jupiter being expansion, Mercury being our communication style and thought. They want to know all of it, the whole story. They're very expansive, they're very deep, but these people maintain a very high level of personal integrity. And this is why they're on my list of markers for fidelity in the natal chart. They're very curious. And although they like to talk a lot, that personal integrity level is what draws people to them. It's like there's an honesty in their curiosity and their philosophy. And they do know a lot about a lot of things. They're very interesting to talk to, but they hold themselves to a high level of integrity. And I think this is a very beautiful aspect. And it really wasn't an aspect that I expected to come up in this series. But after some studying, I have found that Mercury in harmonious aspect to Jupiter is a very valid marker for fidelity in the natal chart. These natives are also very optimistic and fun to be around. I just wanted to add that. So, if you would like to get a reading, an appointment to learn more about your natal chart and fidelity and loyalty in your chart or your partner's chart, I love to do compatibility readings, and you can book an appointment with me through soulnavigation.com, or you can look at the notes below for a link. Okay, let's go on to our next marker in the natal chart that indicates fidelity. This one is a little surprising, but it's Venus in a harmonious trine, conjunction, or sextile aspect to Venus. Oops, Neptune and Venus together. So, Neptune is the planet of unconditional love. It is the higher octave of Venus. But now I have to say, Neptune is also the planet of deception. It's also that rose colored glasses planet. It's a planet of confusion and delusion. But being the higher octave of Venus, making a harmonious aspect to Venus, this can bring some of the most dedicated, loyal, harmonious, lovely love that I've ever seen. It's very romantic. And if you have your Venus in harmonious aspect to Neptune, it's very loving. This is the kind of energy where you would absolutely do anything for the person that you're committed to. And it is very loyal because, unlike having the square, the blockage, or the opposition where you can't find a balance, when you have Venus in harmonious aspect to Neptune, usually your self-esteem is higher. You don't have those issues with Venus about your looks or your values. And it's easier to be loyal to someone because you're loyal to yourself. When you have your own self-esteem, it's so much easier to esteem others the way you esteem yourself. So these people are good-hearted, they're good-natured, they're kind. So this is why Neptune with Venus in harmony is loyal, there's fidelity, and there's a lot of romantic love there. One of my favorites. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Actually, that was my last one, but I have one more that was a surprise, not only to me, but maybe to you too. Again, leave me comments. This is when you have the sun in a harmonious aspect to the moon, especially the trine. If you have your sun and moon conjunct in the same sign, or you have the trine and somewhat even the sextile, the energy from the sun and the moon flows. It's like your life force, the sun, and your instincts, your primal instincts, and your emotions flow together in this harmonious way. And when you're in tune with yourself, it's so much easier to be in tune with someone else because you know yourself. There's not a conflict between your soul or your ego and your emotions. It's when your ego says it wants to do something and your emotions are saying, no, I don't think that's a good idea. There's conflict there. But when you have the sun and the moon in harmony in the conjunction in the same sign, or the trine or the sextile, they're in agreement with each other. There's not an argument within yourself. And I think this lends its element of loyalty and fidelity when you have this, because when you're in tune with yourself, it just makes it so much easier to be in tune with a committed relationship, to be in tune with your partner. I actually like the sun and moon in harmony together. And let's go back and look at these aspects again. And I want to say that if you don't have these aspects, any of them, it doesn't make you a more of a cheater or any less loyal. But look through your chart and see how many of these you have, and know that this can change in the progress chart as your progressions move. You may have more loyalty markers or more fidelity markers in the progress chart. So let's go back over this. If you have a fixed sign on the descendant, if you have Venus in a harmonious aspect to Saturn, if you have Saturn in the 7th or the 8th house, if you have Pluto in the 7th house, if you have Venus in harmony with Neptune, if you have Mercury in harmony with Jupiter, and finally, if your sun and your moon are in harmony. That one's to a lesser degree, but I still love that aspect. Okay, everybody, please leave comments, leave questions, and I will see you next time. Bye from Florida.